Um, I have a couple of housekeeping items to share before we turn it over to our speaker, Valerie Lockhart. So if you could move to the next slide, Carla. Okay, excellent. So today's Lunch and Learn program will be start with a 25-30 minute presentation by our speaker, Valerie Lockhart, and then we'll have a nice long time for questions and comments afterwards. If you have a question at any time during the speaking, just enter it in the chat and Carla and I will keep note of it and try to bring it up near the end. We'd like to encourage conversation for the whole time, but if you need to leave early for an afternoon meeting or something like that, um, that is perfectly acceptable as well. As you may have heard, this presentation is going to be recorded and we will make it available on our Minitex YouTube channel just in a couple of days. And so we will follow up with an email to everyone who's registered with a link to that recording as well as any other materials that the speaker has shared with us. Um, and oh, yes. So as I mentioned earlier, you can put your questions in the chat or you raise your hand during the Q&A, at which point we can unmute you. So next slide, please. Okay, great. So with that, I'll introduce myself. And my name is Stephanie Hess. I'm a curator for the Minnesota Digital Library here at Minitex. And helping run today's session is my colleague, Carla Fall, who is an outreach and instruction librarian also here at Minitex. Our presenter today is Valerie Lockhart, and she is the executive director of the Minnesota Tech Network. She'll introduce herself a little bit more in her own talk, but I just wanted to let you know who's all here in the room, and I think we're ready for you to take it away, Valerie.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me get my screen up here. All right. Let's see, you just give me a thumbs up if you're seeing slides. Be awesome.
I see the slides. I also see your browser window.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay, good. Yeah, it sounds good to me.
All right. So as Stephanie said, my name is Valerie Lockhart. I am the executive director of MTN, which is the Minnesota Tech Network. I also, for the last 10 years, 10 years ago, I started the Minnesota Women in Tech. And so through those two organizations, I have been doing a lot of tech and media training and helping people leverage technology for different projects and communications that they need to do. So I spend a lot of my time working with educators, entrepreneurs, and engineers who are all excited about what AI can do, but also rightfully worried about what it can replace and who's being left out of conversations in that space. And that's why I put together this talk. There's a lot of things, there's a new AI tool on the market every 5 minutes. There's a new hype that's happening with people thinking it's going to either kill the world or save it. And I think those are both extremes, and there's probably somewhere in the middle that we will we will land, right? It's a tool, but we need to make sure that we're using it ethically and safely and those things. So it's not it's not really like human versus AI. It's like, how do we find the blend between those things? And we want to make sure that in the process of using AI, we're not losing the human qualities that we have, like empathy and creativity and trust. And so accessibility is kind of where these worlds meet in AI, not just about, screen readers or ramps. It's about designing systems that are actually good for real people and help us manage data and lead teams. So that's just a little bit about why. For the last 5 or 6 years, I have worked with a team here in Minnesota called WECO, Digital Accessibility. They are a company that hires only people with living with disabilities so that they have real experience testing digital products and making sure that they actually work for folks. And so I've been pretty immersed in that world and have learned, that these AI tools that keep coming out are not always what they're cracked up to be or what they claim to be. And so, just a little background of why humans need to be involved in this. So, level setting a little bit, kind of what we'll talk about today. We're going to explore how AI both helps and hurts and discuss some of the ways that we can reduce bias in both design and data. And then we will look at, human in the loop frameworks, how it's being used in some cases, and then talk about how we can start to measure effectiveness in these efforts and make sure that we're staying or setting up good procedures and good policies and that kind of thing. Like Stephanie said, and Carla before her, if you have questions during this whole thing, I would love for you to put them in the chat. There's a lot to go through, so we will wait till the end because it's only 20 to 30 minutes that I get. But please put them in the chat so we don't lose them or you don't forget what you wanted to ask. So what is accessibility? Why are we talking about this? A lot of people tend to think that it's just about digital access, but there's really, five or five plus types of accessibility that we can talk about. So it's not just about, physical ramps or mobility aids, but it's also cognitive, like is complexity of language, people dealing with executive function issues, memory load. Barriers can also be monetary. So even in AI, there's a growing gap of people that have only access to free AI tools versus a paid model and the differences of what you can accomplish with those things. There's social and emotional components to accessibility. So how culturally inclusive is it? What's the stigma around disability and how does that play into these systems? And then, of course, the digital accessibility. So making sure devices are actually compatible and that screen readers can see information and read it, and everybody can engage with the tool in the same way. So I'm super curious with this group. I don't know, obviously whoever's watching this comes from lots of different backgrounds and lots of different environments. But I'm wondering, of those five or six, what are some of the most overlooked access points in your environment? So if you can throw it in the chat, maybe if I'll go back to the list, but physical, cognitive, monetary, social and emotional, digital, like what do you feel gets overlooked the most in your experience or your environment? And like I said, you can just throw those in the chat. I'd love to see that. All right, so got lots of monetary, cognitive, yep, cognitive, monetary. Those tend to be the ones people don't really think about a lot. So awesome. Yep, neurodivergence. Yep, monetary. Awesome. Thank you. That is very common, I will say. People think about the physical aspects, but they don't really think about those other components. So I appreciate that. All right. So we'll talk quickly about some media minimums. Most of you in any role that you're in or any environment that you're in, you're going to be creating content of some sort, whether it's emails, videos, social media posts, whatever it is, they're going to be creating some kind of contest or content. And so I think if you take nothing else away from today, these are kind of the minimal viable product specs for accessible media. You always need to have captions and make sure that you are giving people more time than you think you might need to read them. Your color contrast should always meet the minimum visibility thresholds. And there are online testers for that, and they work really well. So you can, have an image or take your image and have it check the contrast of your colors to make sure that people with visibility issues can see them, or even color blindness. Those could be tested for. And then last, if you're using any kind of animation, make sure that you're giving someone an option to opt out of that. Um, it's it's really, it can trigger motion sensitivity, it can trigger migraines. So like, make sure there's always a way for somebody to either turn it off or to minimize it when you're creating things like that to share out to the public. Even really experienced professionals can forget, that these things can be triggering. And then with AI generated captions, which people are using a lot, you always want to make sure that you're checking those and making sure that they're actually accurate, because it can mishear things, or it's not really trained on, the way people speak. And so, with different speech impediments or things that happen, it can be wrong information. So you always just want to make sure you do a human pass to ensure that it's credible and that it's actually what you want it to be saying. And that goes with any AI outputs. Obviously, you want to have a human person who knows check them, whether it's translation or just the words. Make sure that they're correct. So some of these things that we're talking about are ways that AI can both help and hurt. Obviously, like, it can save time with running the captions, but the AI doesn't always understand identity or nuance. And so it can strip away some of the things that are meaningful in the conversation and kind of reduce people to just objects. And so this is why we kind of stress all the time to keep human representation and that review as a critical step in any process for if you're using AI. Even on the market right now, there are some AI checkers for web accessibility and for those kind of things. They will also miss some things. And so that's why it's important to test with people who have that experience. So either they're using a screen reader or speaking a different language, make sure that they're checking these things over and making sure that they are accurate. The concept of universal design is important to me. It's, designing for edge cases helps everybody and makes things easier for people. So I want to talk a little bit about places where AI can help in some of these things. So with captions, obviously better comprehension for everybody. I know myself, like, I watch a lot of shows with captions on, even though I don't live with a disability, a hearing disability. And so it can just be helpful. Uh, Sometimes I will use AI, like read aloud tools, where it will read the information to me. Maybe I'm driving or walking and can't like sit and read something. So I will use Notebook LM to create podcasts for myself of information that I want to listen to. I don't know if anybody here has done that, but it's been super helpful for me. I've even built that into some of my instructional design. So making sure that learners have different ways that they can input information. And so that's always been helpful. Making sure that structured content, so for those of you who maybe are web developers or are doing content on your websites, using headings and tagging things for SEO also helps, people that don't speak English as well. Like, it's easier on mobile. So having that structured content can really be helpful. And then security measures are always, cybersecurity are always good, but we'll talk a little bit about how that can go wrong. So there is a there, in this digital world that we live in, everything is online, and we're trying to make things safe for users, but that can sometimes inadvertently hurt people and hurt certain people from being able to access things. So things like CAPTCHAs, where you have to click on all the things that include a bicycle ring or things like that. A lot of times those CAPTCHAs are only using visual information to let you through the barrier. And so if that's the case, if you're not a visual person and there's not a good explanation of it, are you really free to access the information that you need? Um, there have been these new AI fraud detectors that will utilize the camera on a device and kind of do facial recognition or tracking on users. And if there's certain behavior that they detect, it could flag that person as suspicious or as not. Sometimes this will get used in job recruitment. And so sometimes people that maybe have a tic or have some other thing going on with their facial expressions or ability to keep an eye contact, those kind of things will trigger barriers, and it will say that this person isn't a good candidate based on those things. And so just thinking about and being aware of how AI is being used in some of these situations, that while it's not intended purpose, it's almost like an unintended consequence of keeping people from access to what they need. And so when you're building things, or if you are developing these tools or websites for these things, it's always good to offer choice. So let them have multiple ways of authenticating if you're building a website. So letting them choose between getting an email or a text or even a phone call to verify who they are. Choice is accessibility. And so you don't have to, have only a certain way, but if there is an option to give people choice, it's always a good thing. And then always just test with diverse users. Just like we test code, we should also be testing access to our websites and some of those security flows with people that are users of alternative communication devices or screen readers and that kind of thing. All right, let me see. So there we go. An interesting thing that I came across that I wanted to touch on today. There's been some studies just looking at what information or what data is getting included in some of these large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini, and the kind of that inherent bias that gets built into the system. Obviously, there's many different types of bias that we hear about with AI, but there's kind of a deeper layer than even what we hear about. And the study said that 90% of all human-like AI agents that are being built will exclude autistic perspectives. So the people that are building them, or the information that's being used to create these models, it doesn't include people that live with autism. It doesn't include them in the design process of the information or of the interaction. And so I fear that like AI, it comes at the cost of who's not being exposed or in the conversation, who's not at the table, and then whose communication is considered normal. Especially when we're talking about AI that analyzes tone or sentiment or even like the facial expressions, like I said, a lot of those models are being trained on neurotypical behavioral data sets, and they're not including those cases that are going to happen. And so a lot of times, you know, the cues aren't the same and they don't align with an actual state. And so people are going to get flagged for things and not have access to what they need. So it's misreading behavior because those people are not involved or invested in building the data. And so with the data set and with the design, the user experience side of it, um, very neurotypical design usually equates good experience with things that are highly visual, stimulating, certain conversational tones, making sure that they're fast and adaptive, um, and emojis and things like that. And when we don't have the autistic perspective in mind, those things can be cognitively overwhelming and distracting. And so just having a better balance of those can be helpful. Reducing kind of sensory overload, making sure that your instructions are clear and literal and not emoji filled or like small talk or things that people might references that people might not get. Um, and then not making things mandatory like engagement or chatting with everyone in the meeting or things like that. So it's just kind of thinking about how these perspectives might be missing from our processes or from our engagement. And remembering that inclusion isn't about special treatment, it's about accurately modeling reality and making sure that you're meeting people where they are and for what they need. So we've talked about that bias a little bit, but it amplifies at every stage in AI development and use. So there's, the missing representation in the data collection. There's the missed opportunity when we're working on features for a website or for our content or for however we're designing that. We can miss out and kind of the next stage of bias happens. And then when we train models, we're reinforcing those norms of the majority if we're not including. And then when it's deployed, like the output that we're using from the AI, if we don't check it for these biases, we're just repeating that and keeping that going in this loop, a feedback loop. And so it ends up that it's just structural instead of an accident. It ends up being built into every part of the structure of AI. And so just something to keep in mind as if you are training models or if you are working at building these processes, to just double check at every stage. And because I liked this quote that came up, without humans in the loop, AI doesn't serve, it just guesses. And guessing isn't good enough when it comes to talking about someone's learning experience or access to services, or participation in public life. And so it's important, especially when we're talking about using AI to detect accessibility needs. The AI only knows what it's been trained on, and so it can make a pretty good guess as to what people might need, but I'd rather be asked. In the disability community, there's a saying like nothing about us without us. And I think that those are good words to live by, particularly as we go into this age of AI and making sure that we're not leaving people behind. And so as we're designing anything, whether it's physical structure, whether it's process, whether it's content, anything, anything you're designing or putting together or building needs to be designed for humans and then tested with humans. All right, now we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about how this is being used already in certain use cases. We'll go through this kind of fast, but just some interesting use cases I have found. Um, Over the last few years, my team at MTN and I have been spending a lot of time training and testing on multimodal approaches to sharing information. So this looks like voice and gesture working together for mobility impairments. We have created these things called microsims, which are little visual representations of information that are interactive, and people can, adjust a slider and see how it affects the waves, so they can understand information in different ways. And then haptics, for those of you who might not know, is kind of a new world in development for tech. But it's the kind of thing that makes your phone shake in certain instances. Like if you click on a button, it'll give you physical feedback, the haptic feedback through the phone. And so some of those it's just multiple ways of giving information and reinforcing in the information that you're trying to convey. And so, as we move into a more multimodal world, using things like haptics for feedback, it really opens up endless possibilities of how we can engage people and give them information in different ways. And I get excited about that. So, another thing I want to talk about is creating authentic AI workflows. So when I work with students, this is really just anything you're working to automate with AI, whether it's, summarizing your emails or setting up systems with Zapier is a tool that I use to kind of connect systems and automate things. As you're doing any of those things, making sure that you are keeping the human components where they need to be. So it can look like using ChatGPT to draft some ideas or give the model your ideas, making sure you're giving it a persona and having it poke holes in some of your assumptions. You can use it to manually refine the tone of what you're writing. And so just making sure you're double checking with that, and then making sure you have human review for emotional clarity. The one thing I always tell students when they get an output from AI, and it's something that is supposed to be written from you, like, does this actually sound like you? Has your sense been, or yourself been lost in the translation of working with this AI? Those are the kind of things that we can bring that authenticity back into it and still use the tool for what it does and to build, faster and get us ideas and help us brainstorm, but not lose ourselves in the process of that. And making sure that we're still represented in what we're putting out from the AI outputs. So this gets to how we're actually knowing that these accessibility measures in AI are working. So there's a couple of different ways that we can test things. There are things it's called performance parity. So does the model perform consistently among different ability groups? So if you're using AI for something, testing it across different models, testing it with different personas, testing it with is it performing the same if you're using it in all these different use cases? The disability error rate is similar to a word error rate, which is used in speech recognition. It's basically a calculation of how many words a system gets wrong by comparing its output to a reference transcript. And so in the disability error rate, it is looking at the fairness, like how well is each model handling atypical or disabled speech? Is it able to, like, what is that calculation of how many it's getting wrong versus how many it's getting right? And so these are some of the, uh, and then scorecards. So asking your users, people that live with disabilities, to measure how they're engaging with your information or how they're engaging with your process, and using that as like the scorecard is like proof of that your accessibility measures are actually working. So these are just a couple of, it's really about testing and making sure that the things that you're doing are actually landing and actually helping people have access to things, instead of just making the assumption that it's working. Coming up, there are a couple of, right now, AI is kind of this wild west, right? Like there aren't a lot of regulations on it. There aren't a lot of like nationwide standards or anything like we can look at, but they are starting to come into play. And so accessibility fits within, uh, there's this NIST framework. And NIST has come up with an AI framework specifically that will help kind of, um, it will help with some of the governance of how it's being used in processes and how it's being used in manufacturing, and some of these different global ways. And so NIST's framework has 4 different actions. How is it measures how AI is being governed, how it's being mapped, how it's being measured, and then how it's being managed. And so it looks at all of these things, and how inclusion is risk management. So uh, it's a lot to get into. It's too much for this talk, but just know that there are a couple of these like accountability oversight these frameworks that are coming into place that will help companies and organizations be able to um, have that quality assurance in accessibility, to make sure that the AI that they're using is responsible, that it is not excluding people, and that uh, these things can be embedded into our documentation and audits to make sure that we are using it responsibly. Like I said, lots to get into there, but just know that it is being addressed, even though right now we're in the Wild West and it doesn't really it doesn't really feel like we have structure, but it is being built. So takeaways and next steps. I think the crux of what I'm trying to get at today, is that we need to start with human centered design and testing. That's what it all really comes down to. We need to design for real people, test with real people, stay curious, and then iterate. You're not going to get everything right all the time or the first time. So, because AI is a tool, I liken it when I talk to students, I likened it to fire. It's a tool that, can help us greatly. It can warm our food, it can keep us hot and keep us warm and safe, but it can also be super destructive. And I feel like AI is kind of the same thing. It's this tool that can both harm and help, but we really have to lean into the ways that make it helpful. And we have to consider how that looks different for different people. And so if we keep humans at the center of it and we're doing the testing with real people, I feel like it can be a win-win situation. There are some great examples happening. There's a couple of different projects I wanted to highlight. Google's Project Euphonia is a speech recognition program where they're testing and training on atypical voices. And then Be My Eyes is for blind users. It's real-time image interpretation. So it's taking and scanning images and giving immediate feedback verbally, online. So just reading what the pictures are to somebody using AI. And then Microsoft Seeing AI is kind of a similar program, really, built around visual impairment and helping people with low vision, um, navigate the web and navigate the world a little bit easier. So just wanted to throw these out here so you know some of the cool things that are happening in that space, um, and that are making sure that our AI systems are accessible. So here are three things that you can do right now in every organization or every use case, I'll say. You can audit where AI is showing up in your platforms, in the offices, in your classrooms, um, and then investigate how it's responding to things. So if you identify where it lives, the bias lives in these systems, you will find it because it's there, but then identifying that and knowing how to counteract it when you come across it. Ask real users how things are actually working for them. So don't just make assumptions. Ask people how it actually works and how what their experience is like. And then making sure that you're keeping human feedback loops into every process and procedure. So don't ever just trust the AI output to keep going and just running and assuming that it's going to keep doing the same thing, because it won't. There's going to be hallucinations. There's going to be times where it breaks down. There's going to be times where it just makes things up. And sometimes those can be super detrimental, depending on what the use case is. And so I guess I would say, besides the, media side of things and the content, if you remember anything else from today, it's just audit things, co-design with humans, and then iterate, redefine what that means in your own systems. So with that, I want to open it up. I know we only have 15 or 20 minutes or so left, so I want to make sure I get time for your questions. And if anyone is ever interested, you can email me. I'm always happy to discuss accessibility and AI at length, ad nauseum. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Valerie. That was super helpful. It's nice to think about the different ways we can include humans in the loop for sure. Does anyone have any questions they want to start out with? I did see one earlier in the chat a couple of slides ago from Jamie about you were talking about the sound and gesture AI and whether or not it reads things like sign language.
I know there's some tools that are working on that. They're trying to build models. It's tough with sign language because even within the sign language community, there's different languages. And so
True.
just like with spoken language, they have a hard time making sure that it can read every gesture, but
Yeah.
I know they are working. There are some people working on it. Even I think some people at the U have been trying to develop
That's cool.
some tools. So yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's coming.
that's awesome. All right. Any other questions? I had a question back when you were talking about the different types of accessibility, all the
Yeah.
five different ones. And I was wondering if you could talk about maybe which area you think could benefit the most from AI tools and intervention.
Obviously, I think digital is
Mhm.
is kind of where the most majority of it is going to happen. But I do think like we can use it to help in any of them
Mhm.
by using the tools to check our own biases. So a lot of the time when I'm working with any model, what I like to do is have it take on a persona of kind of an adversarial persona and have it ask me questions or like uh, kind of so I can steel man my own arguments for
Mhm.
things or my own ideas,
Mhm.
but have it like act as an adversary so that I can practice or like it sometimes illuminates things that I haven't thought of. And so, in any of those accessibility areas, there's going to be things that we haven't even considered. And
Mhm.
so, using AI to kind of help us grasp a different perspective can be helpful.
Yeah, that's true. Um, questions from the audience at all? Otherwise, I have another one. Um, I was struck by when you were talking about the importance of testing these tools, that it kind of puts the burden on people with disabilities or people, like, again, like, tell us if this doesn't work, that sort of a
Yeah.
thing. Do you have any ways to address that concern?
I think what I've seen be most successful is to have people who are living with disabilities be involved from the very start. So that they're at the design phase and not just the testing phase.
Sure.
And so a lot of times you can address some of those things earlier in the process and not have as much burden in the testing, if that makes sense. You can kind of knock a lot of that out in the
Mhm.
beginning.
Yeah.
So I think that's, having that perspective at every level of the process
Mhm.
helps.
Mhm. Yeah, not just
Uh,
at the end and say, hey, fix the problems that I made or
yeah,
something.
like, oh, I made all these assumptions and I built this thing and now you make sure it's okay. Like
Right.
that, it needs to be more of a collaborative
Mhm.
process from the very beginning.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see.
Jamie's got another question in here. They said they pointed homeless patrons to ChatGPT to help create resumes because there's no paywall. Is there anything else out there that is better?
ChatGPT's free version is good. It's very good. I mean, it's I feel like what they're doing is every time they upgrade the paid version, they upgrade the free version to what the paid one used to be. And
Mhm.
so like I don't think we're going backwards anytime soon. Like it's going to continue to be as good as it is. And they're all trained on different similar but different model, like different information. I don't know specifically one that's better for resumes. I would assume ChatGPT is probably good. Um, yeah, off the top of my head, I can't think of one that might have better training data on for resumes than that. I'm sure I'd have to look into this because I haven't looked in a while at a free version, but you may still be able to access some of the custom GPTs in the free version. And there may be, if you look in the custom GPT has a library of models that people have built and shared. And there may be one in there that is like a resume specific um, custom GPT. So that I would look there for, like I said, I haven't done the research myself, but that might be a place that would be better because it would be trained on more specific data.
That could be helpful.
Yeah. And really for anybody, if you're looking for something that is more specific, those custom GPTs can be really helpful because they filter out a lot of the noise that regular GPT chat has. It helps it focus better on an area
Mhm.
of content so that you're not kind of getting a bunch of Reddit posts and things
Mhm.
that are kind of, could be full of garbage. So
Right.
it helps a little bit.
Sure. I've learned about the importance of crafting a really good prompt when you're working with AI tools, and I'm
Yeah,
wondering if can you build like accessibility into your prompt too, like in the
absolutely.
language
Yep.
you use? Yeah.
Yeah, so using personas, it's been a thing in marketing forever,
Mhm.
but it really helps with prompting because it tells the AI model what role to take and what lens to view things through. And so it's not going to be 100% accurate, but if you gave it a persona of someone living with a disability, it
Mhm.
might illuminate some of those other areas or things that you hadn't considered before you asked the question of it. So
Yeah,
that could help.
that's cool.
Again, you just don't want to make sure that's your only reference.
No, right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't fully trust the robots, but just use
No,
them,
trust
right?
them enough and then trust but verify.
Yes, there you
Yes.
go.
Yes.
Okay, Steve asked, kind of as a follow-up, how would you structure a disability prompt?
So I would start with that persona. I would say, you are a um, whatever. Let me think of like you are a person living with low vision. Please give me uh, five different ways that I could structure this website so to make it more accessible for you. And so then it will kind of, it's a, I try to use any AI model not as an answer tool, but as a brainstorming tool so that I can I can make the decisions and not just go with what it says. So I always have it give me multiple options or like ask me 10 questions about this or so giving it the persona, giving it the output that you want it to give you, like and then having a constraint around it.
Mhm.
Those can help get better. It's a better prompt. And then there are um, there are projects that you can create. If you have a paid version of some of these models, you can upload information like a PDF or an image or something. Giving it context is very important. So, not just what the prompt is, but what the context is that you're having it look at as well. Between those things, it can help get a good, that can be a good structure for getting a good prompt.
Yeah, sounds super helpful.
And then I thought, is it Natalie, maybe Resume AI? I haven't used that one because, like I said, there's a new tool all the time. But that if that one works, I love it.
Mhm.
Finding models that are actually trained for the thing that you're trying to do is super helpful.
I like to think of the AI tools as brainstorming rather than like search engines. And I
Mhm.
Yes.
always had the scenario prompt. I've gotten so much better at scenario prompting,
Yep.
and like structuring it as you, the AI tool,
Yep.
Mhm.
rather than I need.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep. It's there was a big study paper that came out from Google in 2019, I think it was, that was all you need is attention. And that was exactly what it was about. It was about how the models need that focus to filter out all of the other training data to hallucinate less. And so, yeah, it just giving it that persona and the context and like giving it um, just like we do, like the AI likes stories. And so if you tell it what the situation is,
Mhm.
it will give you better results. So just like people, we like stories too. The other thing I should bring up, and I didn't talk about this in my talk, but there was a study that just happened at MIT that looked at like cognitive function using AI. And it found that if you just ask the AI to just kind of give you the information, like using it like a search engine, there was actually like cognitive decline
Mhm.
shown. But if you fed the AI your kind of rough idea, or here's kind of what I'm thinking, can you help me like reshape this or repurpose it? That same cognitive decline didn't happen.
Mhm.
And so it's just interesting how, like, and it makes sense if we're like just offshoring our thinking to the robots, like, we're going to do less of it. And
Mhm.
so, but it was actually like shown in the brain waves, which is scary. But don't let the robots think for you. That's the crux.
Good to keep in mind for sure.
Yes, yes. We have to keep ourselves in the loop as well.
Mhm. Definitely.
I'm going to bring back up our slides to remind folks
Mhm.
of our survey. And Stephanie, if you want to add that to the chat,
Mhm.
the link to the chat, that would be really helpful. Your feedback is really helpful in shaping these series, not just the AI webinar series, but any webinars that we produce through Minitex. But certainly, we've gotten a lot of good, helpful feedback on AI specifically, and that's really been um, helpful for us. And
Mhm.
we would like to continue this series in the fall, so your feedback will help shape that. And then lastly, just thank you for joining us. We have one
Yes.
more session in our series, and thank you, Valerie, for your session. This was really informative. I
Awesome. Thank
appreciate it.
you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So one more session in the series in February. Look for that. If you didn't sign up for the entire series, you can sign up for um, the February 19th session on its own. So please go ahead and do that. And thank you all. I'll stop the recording.